I like Mega Man bosses, but they are really hard until we learn how to beat them. Then, they range in difficulty from pitifully easy to moderately difficult to still downright frustrating. Luckily, every Robot Master has a weakness to another Robot Master's weapon. These make the fight easier for players who do not want to beat them using only the Mega Buster. Boss weaknesses also reward players for learning a weakness cycle. In early games, weaknesses simply dealt more damage to the bosses. This changed in Mega Man 7. Now, weaknesses stun the Robot Masters in addition to dealing more damage. This sounds good on paper, but as a side effect, these Robot Masters reset their attack patterns whenever the player hits them with their weakness. Sometimes they still bring challenges, but most come down with a nasty case of Cloudman syndrome. Cloudman, the namesake of this condition, has a fun and interesting attack pattern. You must watch what he is doing, where he is, and where you are in order to dodge his attacks. He changes the weather and tries to push you into the bottomless pits on the edges of his room. But none of this happens if you use his weakness on him. When making boss fights with weaknesses, you have to be careful about how those weaknesses affect the bosses. If you are not careful, players will easily be able to stun lock the bosses or lock them into a simple pattern that sucks all of the challenge out of the fight. 6 of the 8 Robot Masters in Mega Man 7 suffer from some form of Cloudman syndrome, making the boss fights unnecessarily easy. Turbo Man just keeps driving under you, Spring Man only gets to do one attack, and Junk Man throws trash at you. Some of the fights are okay. Burst Man makes it difficult to hit him with his weakness if you do not have good timing, and Slash Man has a unique effect when you hit him with the Freeze Cracker. And the Scorch Wheel sucks. But anyway, these weaknesses cripple the bosses they are used against. The only bosses that work with their weaknesses in this game are Freeze Man and Shade Man. Freeze Man barely changes his attack pattern after being stunned, and Shade Man only reacts under specific circumstances, but the weakness still works since Wild Coil lets you hit him while he's flying. Every other boss is a snooze fest, and it makes the boss rush at the end boring. This is not to say that weaknesses shouldn't stun bosses, but these fights benefit from creative ways that weaknesses affect the Robot Masters. In Mega Man 8 and Mega Man in Base, this problem is mostly fixed, allowing for more intuitive boss design. Each boss takes extra damage from their weakness during the whole fight, but their weaknesses only stun them during a specific part of their pattern. Usually this involves knocking them out of one of their special attacks, which makes players strategize when to use the boss's weakness, either to get extra hits in or to avoid taking extra damage. Burner Man from Mega Man in Base complements this design well. Though he takes no damage from his weakness during much of the fight, the hefty amount he does take when pushed into a pit of spikes by the ice wall balances this out. Another example is Tengu Man in Mega Man 8. Since he is an air-based boss with a ground-based weakness, the ice wave cannot hit him easily while he flies around, but that only makes it more satisfying to freeze him in place for a few extra hits when he decides to taunt you. Dynamo Man does not flinch when hit by his weakness at all, but the copy vision still changes the fight by blocking his most powerful attacks. These are just a few of the creative ways these two games implement weaknesses into their boss fights. Unfortunately, these games still do not have immunity to Cloudman syndrome. No, each of these games still has one Robot Master afflicted by it, but this makes them stand out even more among bosses with well-designed weaknesses. When the series decided to jump back to the 8-bit style for Mega Man 9, weaknesses no longer stunned bosses, but every Robot Master's weakness carried some other advantage to it, making the fights more interesting and more in the player's favor. Laser Trident destroys concrete blocks, Black Hole Bomb sucks up the Jewel Satellite, and the Magma Bazooka spreads perfectly to take out the Hornet Chaser. Each boss fight's design works with their weakness to give an edge that goes beyond simply dealing more damage. Mega Man 10 also does this, but to a lesser extent. These weaknesses never go quite to the same extent of power as they do in 7, 8, or Base, but all these games show how a slight change in how a weakness works can have a major impact on a boss fight. In the first 6 games, a lot of Robot Masters have lackluster and boring weaknesses, some of which don't even make any sense. But as the series progressed, weaknesses had a greater impact on boss fights, and therefore, the fights themselves got more interesting. With the later games, players can feel much more powerful using a weakness against a boss, seeing the effect it has on them and changing their strategy because of it. If a weakness is too powerful, it will remove all challenge from a fight, but if it is not powerful enough, or does not complement the boss's design well, it will not feel like a weakness at all. Alternate effects from weaknesses are a fantastic way to spice up battles, but let's all learn from Cloudman about how to not make the bosses complete cakewalks.